as someone who is a little bit younger than you,
a lot,
and who looks at your career aspirationally, I think, you know, tracing your story through senior editor of the New Yorker, editor-in-chief of Wired, and now CEO of The Atlantic, was there a singular moment where you noticed that people were like, damn, Nick's got good taste, and we really trust his perspective and the way he looks at the world?
No. My career was a mess from like 20 to 30, right? And then from like 30 to now, it's been like kind of linearly, getting, better and more interesting. And so there's an interesting question that I've grappled with about why it was sort of so chaotic and like so unsuccessful in my 20s, and then, worked well starting in my 30s. But I kind of I got on track. I got hired at 30 to be a senior editor at Wired, and then maybe at 35 to be an editor at the New Yorker, and then I ran their product and dev team, their iPad app, their iPhone app, and I was sort of in the right place at the right time, loving media but having an interest in tech. And then that led to other good things. But there are a lot of different hypotheses for why things started to go well, which I can get into then. But to the question, there wasn't a singular moment. Like, I was a college student with a ton of promise who everybody thought was going to do extremely well, who then got totally unraveled.
Through that journey, and reading a lot of your writing, there's two concepts that I found I wanted to pause, especially given the nature of today's event and a lot of the discussions that have happened. One is about creative offloading and what's happening right now, where we're offloading a lot of our thought to some of these tools. And the second, which I find maybe more inspiring, is about the unwired capacities of human beings, things like emotion, taste. Can you talk about how through that journey, obviously you cultivated that for yourself, and now as you look to your own company and how the employee base is developing and growing, does it worry you? Like, where do you think that is today?
It's a big question. Let me talk first about cognitive offloading, and let me tell you a story about it. So cognitive offloading, you guys probably know this concept, and it's this notion that when you rely on external tools, you sort of dull your own mind, right? And you use Waze, and you lose your ability to navigate, right? And who cares, right? Nobody really knows it doesn't matter whether I can get myself to, Juniper Valley Park in Queens on foot, or whether I can do it with Waze. It does matter when you come to AI, right? And if you're using AI to write, right? You're using AI to do creative stuff, you weaken the skills in your mind. I think you should use AI all day, every day, but I also think you need to be careful. So now to step back, when I was at the New Yorker, I was in my 30s, which is a time where sometimes people feel like you can't get better at stuff, right? Maybe you can accrue more responsibility and you can learn about an organization and you can learn more about the world and you can network, but you're kind of locked into your skill set. And when I started at the New Yorker, I was like, hey, man, I can't write as well as these people, right? You're around these people who are amazing writers, right? And and that's okay, right? My job is an editor. My job isn't to write, but it also inspired me to work really hard. And so I spent a lot of time at the New Yorker while I was there. I would read their stories out loud. I remember I would just sit down. I'm okay, I'm going to take 3 Larissa MacFarquhar stories and I'm going to read them out loud. I'm just going to see what she's doing because she's a better writer than I am. And through that process, through the process of editing, through the process of being there and absorbing, or I would read David Remnick's stories out loud to myself and I would study them. What is he doing? I would try to understand what is the difference between his prose and Kelefa Sané's prose. They're both amazing. And through that process, I got much better at writing. Not as good as they were, but much better. And my writing improved more in those years than any other point in my life. Besides maybe, I guess, middle school, right, when you learn how to do it. And it was a good example of taking a task that maybe we think we have fixed ability in and really pushing myself to get better. So now in the age of AI, how would I go through that process, right? Because there'd be a temptation to do the things that make it worse. Okay, well, I can't quite figure out how to write this. Hey, write this in the style of David Remnick, right? And so you can use the tools to get worse and to have your skills decline, and you can still kind of get through. Or AI does open up the ability to actually use the tools to get better, right? Hey, guide me through the difference between this prose and that prose. Help me understand what's happening here. Critique this prose that I've written, explain to me why it falls short. So I think that the process of cognitive offloading is a scary one. It's a scary consequence of AI. I talk to my children about it. But the same tools that could end up weakening our minds and our creative skills can be used to strengthen them.
Is there a way you keep that in check? To know which...
Yeah, which things do you use it for and which
Correct,
things do you not?
yeah.
Anything... I never use it to do this stuff that is like core to my skill set, right? But of course, it's hard to define that. So I just wrote a book, and there's not a single sentence that is written with AI. But I did use it extensively for research, critique, for analysis. And so I guess I do two things. I try to be very careful. Like, I don't use it for writing. I don't use it for writing even emails, you know? Because writing is so important to myself and my identity. And then two, I try very carefully to, if I ever, the thing you don't want to have happen in your mind is to have a challenge come to you, like an intellectual challenge or a mental challenge, and to have your brain go, oh, gosh, I'll be able to figure out that better when I'm at my computer, right? And if that starts to happen, then like, you got to step back and like, no, I'm going to give an answer right here and right now. I mean, obviously if someone's like, create a 75 slide deck, yeah, you need to get at your computer. But if somebody like asks you a hard question, like, I'll go to ChatGPT. No, like, think about it yourself. So I'm constantly trying to just check myself and make sure that I'm not weakening those mental tools just by relying on these incredible external tools.
I was reading The Atlantic. Quick pub. And there's a 2018 article from Henry Kissinger called "The End of the Enlightenment," all about how human society is not ready for artificial intelligence. And there's a quote that stuck with me that I wanted to ask you about, which is, "What will become of human consciousness if its own explanatory power is surpassed by AI, and societies are no longer able to interpret the world they inhabit in terms that are meaningful to them?" As a journalist, a creative, a street performer, do you feel like creatives are prepared for what's to come?
I think that it's a pretty good moment to be a creative. Like, I think that I think artificial intelligence is awesome. Flawed, but awesome. I think it's a great creative tool. It's a great tool for lots of things. I think that what it will do is it will create the opportunity to, for humans to build new categories of art. So, I don't know, there's a classic example. The camera comes, right? And the painters are like, oh my God, right? What happens? Well, what happens to painting? They turn to impressionism, right? And they sort of, the camera creates a totally new art form, right? And then B, it helps push, it goes to Impressionism. Impressionism goes to like Cubism, it goes to Picasso, right? It goes to Jackson Pollock, right? And you can sort of see this line of breaking from, verisimilitude to, just splatter paint, right? And that probably, I'm not an art historian, but that probably partly happens because of the invention of the camera. And so AI comes along and it's gonna, like the things we do now, like the way people make movies, right, will change, right? And in some ways it'll replace and substitute for some of the things we do, right? But there'll also be people who use it to kind of push things much further. And for as far as I can see, right, it's possible that in like 20 years we'll be like downloading our brains to each other, and we'll be this in like Kurzweilian, AGI insane world that nobody can forecast and foresee. But as far as I can see, the successful creators be the ones who, some of them will be ones who completely break off the grid, right? And are like, I'm not using a machine, this is just me and my pen, right? Or this is whatever. But I think the ones who are most popular and will get the most attention will be ones who are able to use the machines in the most interesting way, who come up with new ways of collaborating, who, different groups of individuals, different philosophies of creativity are able to work together and use AI to power them. I think that's where we're going.
The goal in my first portion of this was to attempt to sell you as a creative to this audience. I think we delivered on that, but I want to move to you as a technologist. and I loved Taylor's questions earlier, and it made me really reflect on how you approached your work at The Wired, where one of your first moves was to change the mission of The Wired. And I believe you characterize it, and I'm paraphrasing, but something to the effect of, our job is not to be a champion of technology. It's to be as smart as we can so that we can keep them in check and keep them honest when they do something wrong, and we can support them when they do something right. What is the tech industry getting right and wrong right now in this moment?
Yeah, I mean, Wired was founded as a champion of the tech industry, but that's when they were like the radical cool outsiders. And by the time I took over, they were all billionaires. And, it was a really hard thing to be editor at that moment, because all these people who like loved Wired were like, you're not upholding the old mission. And I'm like, the world is different, right? Like, my job is not, I remember Elon Musk once like standing in my face and screaming. He's like, you're turning Wired into the motherfucking New Yorker. And I was like, can I put that on the back of my business card? So what is the tech industry doing right now? I mean, they are making amazing tools. I mean, in some ways, they're repeating the same thing they did back when I was the editor of Wired. They are making these amazing tools, and as they do that, they were throwing, safety, alignment, and ethics out the window, right? And like, we're in this terrible moment where the AI companies seem to have collectively decided that, I was having a lunch yesterday with AI executives, and we were talking about copyright. And I was like, there's a pretty legitimate argument that there should be a fair exchange of value, and that if you take all this content from creators, there should be something that you give back. Either you pay a licensing fee, it'd be a natural thing to do, or you build a model where they benefit from it. And the person's like, no, if we do that, China will win, right? And that's kind of the view, right? And it's like, it's not just maybe it's China or its competitors. Like, you could look at the amount of the percentage of money that the big AI companies put into safety and alignment, right? Like, these companies were founded on the principle that they're going to build, AI that is entirely beneficial to humankind. And then, that kind of shifted a little bit because we need to buy a lot of servers. Oh my God, now it's shifting even more because, China's going to win. And so we're stuck in this moment where we're in this like headlong race, and a lot of the sort of values alignment stuff has been thrown out. And so I worry about that. So that's what I worry about. On the plus side, like, this stuff's magic, right? And these people are building it.
I don't want to go fully political, but I need to ask some questions about China.
Sure.
You wrote an article also in 2018, 4 years before ChatGPT came out, about the Cold War, the AI Cold War between the U.S. and China. We are 7 years into that war, ostensibly. Are we winning? What's your take?
Yes, I mean, the article.
What'd you get wrong also in the article?
That's a good question. I can't quite remember enough of it. Was like the article was kind of like just stating that this is happening. So what the article said, as I remember it, and of course I'm remembering only the right things, what the article said is that the world is splitting into two spheres of interest. It's splitting into a China stack and American stack. And this will drive the two countries apart and lead to a higher risk of war, right? And if the world has to decide, okay, we're going to use Huawei chips and run Alibaba and WeChat, or we're going to use NVIDIA chips and run Google and Amazon, like, in every country has to choose one side or the other. That's not a good place to be, right? That was the argument. Since then, the United States has doubled down, right? It was maybe a year after that article that it was the first Trump administration where they cracked down on Huawei, and they arrest the Huawei executive. Biden administration comes in, doubles down again, has a chips policy. Trump administration comes in, triples down. And so what we have seen is like a further trying to like clamp down on China's tech, and like sort of a further bifurcation. Who's winning? I mean, I kind of think we're both losing, right? I think it would be much better for the world if there ends up being super intelligent AI and we have to deal with it. It's kind of be better, like, if both sides like could talk to each other. So we're losing there. B, I think that the United States crackdown, I understand why it happened. I understand why we stopped selling high-end chips to China. I understand the motivation. I understand the logic. I've talked to a lot of people who supported those bills. I think it's been counterproductive. It just means that all this tech is being built on Huawei chips instead of NVIDIA chips. The most interesting thing that has happened is it's sort of, I would not have predicted this. I wouldn't have come within a billion miles of predicting this. All the closed source models are American and all the open source models are Chinese, or not all, but like if you look at the Hugging Face downloads, they're more, Qwen and DeepSeek are now going to surpass Llama and, IBM. So that's wild that China somehow ended up building these open models. And so what I think the world would be in a much safer, more stable place if the US China tech ecosystems more integrated. If like Google operated in China, if you bought Huawei chips here and we bought NVIDIA chips here. I know that's a little Panglossian and like maybe the Huawei chips are hacked and like it was China who banned Google. Any step that gets us closer to that is a good thing.
You made a statement there amidst that around super general intelligence. There's AGI and SGI. AGI, for context for folks, artificial general intelligence, where these machines reach, autonomously functioning at sort of the human capacity. SGI being the next level of that, they're able to, execute well beyond anything that a human could ever imagine. Do you believe we're going to get to those points, and if so, on what timeline?
I think AI will continue to improve. I think it will probably hit an asymptote. I don't think it will reach sort of infinitely recursive self-improvement, but I don't foreclose that possibility. Like Moore's law never slowed down, right? So I'm not sure. It may be the case that transformer model AI like hits a wall, but there'll probably be some other, like there'll be like a neurosymbolic AI that surpasses it, or there'll be a post-transformer architecture. So I don't think there's going to be a substantial slowdown. I do think. I'll tell you why I'm being cautious. Because I think that the most dangerous idea, and I'll explain why, the most dangerous idea in this field that is generally believed is that there is a ASI or AGI or some kind of recursive self-improving artificial intelligence, and whoever gets it first wins, right? Because it'll create infinite wealth and like you'll control the world. And Elon kind of believes this, and like a lot of people in the Trump administration believe it. China may believe it. And if you believe that there is a moment, and it's either going to be the United States or China that gets there first, right? And if you believe that, what is the consequence, right? Because the day before the US gets there, what is China going to do? If you really believe that, well, rationally, they would blow up TSMC and probably bomb Menlo Park, right? And what would we do if we really believed there was like some recursive superintelligence that would lead to like infinite, wealth and success? Well, we would blow up Huawei, right? So, like, okay, so that's one day before it happens. What are you going to do a year before, right? It's just like the consequences.
It's getting pretty heavy, Nick. This is getting pretty heavy.
Well, seriously, but that's. Am I wrong?
No, you're not.
That's why I don't.
I'm like sinking into the chair.
You know what they're going to do 2 days before? They're going to blow up air, and they're. Totally.
No, I'll let you finish. Please finish. I'm on the edge of my seat here.
My point is that, like, if you really believe there's like some line and you cross that line and it's winner take all, you do everything to get the other person from getting to the line. My view is that there is no line, but does that mean that I don't believe that, ASI or AGI could exist? No, I don't believe that.
I just need some air in this room. That was a lot.
I can go back to street music if that's better.
No. Let's conclude the technologist section by just bringing it home to the Atlantic.
Sure.
When you think about the business that you lead every day, what's changed about the business model, the hiring practices, the mandate you place onto your team?
Because of AI, or
because
just
of
like in general the last
because of
4
AI.
years?
Because of AI.
Journalism and AI is super fraught, right? It's incredibly hard. Like, journalists are very worried that AI will take their jobs. We have a very complicated relationship with the AI companies where they've trained themselves on our data mostly without any form of compensation. So the whole conversation is pretty tough. And it's pretty tough internally, and there's a lot of complexity around it. That said, what I try to do is try to like just work on the different areas. Like, what are the ways that we can use AI to do our jobs most effectively? Okay, what are the things that we can build in? There aren't that many things you can build in, but you can make your back end more effective. You can like move Jira tickets along more quickly. Journalists can use it as a research tool. That's one level, right? Eventually they'll be able to use more. We want to be able to like figure out how the writers can use AI to move as efficiently as possible. Then there's this super interesting thing, which is that AI is changing the whole nature of how traffic moves around the internet, right? They're moving from search engines to chatbots, right? You're moving from places that send out links to places that answer your questions, right? So you used to, like 6 months ago, you type in what is the meaning of life to Google, and it sends you to an Arthur Brooks story. Now it just tells you what the meaning of life is. And so traffic is declining across the web. And my goal, one of my goals, is to try to figure out if there's a way to counter that, right? To get the Atlantic part of those inside of that search traffic, and also to work with the tech companies to come up with a different mechanism so that media companies, survive. The next step is trying to figure out what happens next. What happens when we move to an agentic web? What happens when it's not, Shane going to theatlantic.com and reading, but Shane sends out his agent, right? Great. Do we make that agent pay? How do we get advertising revenue in that world? How do we make sure that he's getting a truly representative summary or sample from the Atlantic story? So figuring out how the Atlantic exists in the agentic web. And then last, there's that question of how we partner and how we work with the tech companies, right? And which ones we make deals with, which ones we trade our training data in return for licensing fees, how we partner with them. We're involved in litigation as well. And so all of those different parts of kind of the AI dynamic are part of my job.
Do you think that every business has to move in that direction? Like, is every company a media company that has to figure that out in order to market or sell a product today?
I think the easiest way, the way I think about it is that it's like the closer you were to the training of AI, the sooner it comes, right? So it comes first for engineering and comes second for media, and then vacuum cleaner repair is in the 17th circle. But for every company, there will be elements where you have to deal with it, but I'm pretty close to not as close as you guys are, but we're pretty close to the flame.
Yeah. I wanted to transition to Nick, the human being, the father. Can you talk a little bit about how you're advising? It's three sons?
3 sons.
How are you advising your sons on their career and what to look out for and what to lean into?
I'll tell you a funny story first. One thing I like to do with my kids, and something my father taught me, is I take them, right, wherever I go, or wherever I go where they can go. So I've done 5 trips to Europe in the last 6 months for work. I've had to take at least one kid with me. One of those trips, I was in Geneva for the UNAI for Good Summit, and we meet this guy named Roman, who's a professor at the University of Louisville, and we're having lunch with him, just sit down, talk to people. And I asked him what his PDUM is. And it's his PDUM is 100%. Meaning, if you don't know PDUM, the odds that AI will kill us all. I'm great. And I'm with my 17-year-old son, who's a high school senior here in Manhattan. And so my son's all right. It's so given that, what should I do in college? I'm applying to college. Where should I go? I kid you not, this guy, he's a tenured professor of computer science, says, just go to a party school, man, and enjoy the 4 years.
You love that response, right? You were that's exactly what I want to spend money on.
It's perfect. So my son's been making lists of party schools. So what I say to my kids, I try to get them to use AI, right? And I try to particularly get them to use, I was just experimenting with my 11-year-old, and we were trying to figure out whether the study mode in OpenAI is better for him learning his geometry than guided learning in Gemini, right? I'm trying to get my 15-year-old to use the study mode in OpenAI as an SAT tutor, right? My 17-year-old is all in, right? And you can go into my ChatGPT history, and it's him trying to understand linear algebra. And he told me he wouldn't have been able to understand his math class without the help of AI. So I'm working with them to, he's also on the debate team, and there's a new feature in Notebook LM where you can upload a file and then it'll do a podcast debate. And so he and I were talking about that last night. So I try to get them to use AI as a way to help them do their homework, right? And I don't see all the logs, I'm not checking. Maybe they're writing their papers, but God, I hope not. But they know that they're cheating themselves if they use it to cut corners. So I'm trying to get them to learn how to use it. The schools are totally against me, right? It's still banned on the school computers for my 2 younger kids, which is so dumb. They should ban phones, not AI. Anyway, so that's the use case. But then there's the what do you do with your life question? And, A, no one listens to their parents anyway, but B, to the extent that I give them advice, it's, do what you're passionate about, right? maybe it's less with my kids than young people, right? If I talk to young people, it's the world's going to change a lot. So learn how to be flexible, right? Learn how to shift careers, learn how to do this and then that. Learn how to like, you know, things are going to go wrong. Your company's going to go bankrupt. Like learn how to pick yourself up. You know, back to that question you asked earlier about my career. So one of the reasons, it's kind of a weird reason, but one reason why I think I did a lot better after 30 is I wrote this book from like age 30 to 35. And it was about two people, one of whom was my paternal grandfather, who was a American diplomat. And it was called The Hawk and the Dove. And it traced the lives of my grandfather, Paul Nitze, and George Kennan, who were like the two diplomats who play a role in American foreign policy all the way through the Cold War. And they're rivals, but also friends. But what's so interesting is that my grandfather had this career where he was fired like 7 out of 11 presidents he worked for, just constantly just like getting, you know, would just sort of push too far and, you know, sort of be too stubborn and then get fired. And like most people in Washington, it's a very hierarchical town. You're deputy secretary of defense and you get fired and then you say you will only go back in at that job or better. My grandfather would go back in like 4 levels down and just work his way back up. And it was kind of like reading about him was such an inspiration for how one can live a successful life and the kind of the stoicism and commitment it takes to sort of just keep going and heading towards steady goals and believing in the importance of your mission. So anyway, I mentioned him both to circle back and partly answer the question from the beginning of the conversation, but also because I think it's a good lesson for the world of AI, which is, you know, just figuring out how to like do new stuff, right? If something like, you know, you're doing this thing and the opportunity gets foreclosed, go to the next thing. So that's what I say to my kids, like follow your passions, do stuff you love, be curious and be flexible.
There's been a number of great speakers throughout today, and Emmett and Carly, I felt like projected a lot of confidence, and even you. I mean, you have been in rooms with lots of people talking about challenging topics. Parenting, I find, is an interesting frame, simply because it's like illogical and anxiety-inducing for all of the reasons. Like, as a father, what are you scared about for your kids when you think about the future that they're stepping into, if anything?
You know, I'm scared about a world where like society can't keep up with the pace of change, right? I feel like, and that was partly this topic at Wired, you know, like American politics broke, right? We have built the most incredible democratic country in the world, and it's not totally broken, but it's kind of breaking, and it's breaking, I think, you know, for lots of reasons and complicated reasons, but in part because technology moved too fast, right? And because like we couldn't understand the consequences of what looking at our screens and moving into filter bubbles and engagement algorithms, and we just didn't understand what was happening. And so we then created a system that created the politicians who, you know, are successful today, which is not something that seems likely to be sustainable. Like maybe we'll get out of this moment of hatred and chaos and we'll get back to something else, but maybe not, right? And so it's very hard for society. Technology like underpins the norms that hold us together, and if we can't evolve our institutions and our way of thinking, like it could be a rocky ride for them and for us. And then like I also worry about a world where, you know, everybody is like, kids all spend too much time on their phones, right? And they're all no parent wishes their kids spent more time on Snapchat, right? And no child looking back at their childhood will wish they had spent more time on Snapchat, right? It's unquestionably
it's TikTok now. Everybody's over Snapchat. It's a big thing.
Okay,
They've
well,
moved on.
TikTok.
No, they're saying there's Snap. Okay, I'm sorry. They're still on Snapchat. Okay. Thank you.
Nobody wishes they spent more time on their phones. But now what's going to happen is, you know, Facebook is going to populate, Meta's going to populate Instagram with infinitely beautiful people who will like your posts and say exactly what you want to say. And it's going to have pulled all of your personal data from your WhatsApp chats with like this new team they've put billions of dollars into. And it's going to create Westworld, right? And so I'm not even kidding, right? Like
I'm going to go back in my chair again.
Yeah. someone is going to make social media Westworld, right? It's either going to come out of Instagram, it's going to come out of TikTok, and it's going to be all these fake humans, and they're going to be like exactly what you desire, saying exactly what you want, right? And like we're going to have to fight that. But my kids are going to grow up in a world where like lots of people are in that world, right? And you're already seeing this, like the ChatGPT girlfriends. You know, it's a. How many of you are in a deep romantic relationship with a bot? It's coming for us.
There was a few years ago. There was a 20-something who was exploring the chaos of the world in his time and got abducted in Morocco. And do you think his parents had the same worries when in that political environment where technology was moving? Is it the same thing all over again, or is this different? You can also tell us why you got abducted in Morocco, if you would like to.
I got abducted in Morocco, almost the opposite. I mean, in some ways, like the lesson, maybe I should have spent more time on my phone, right? I just was like, I was 22 years old, and I was like, I'm going to Africa, and I'm going to go bring my guitar, and I'll see what happens. And I got kidnapped in Morocco. Like, maybe I should have been on Snapchat. I wish they'd invented it.
You can turn location on. You can do that now. It's a thing.
I know, I would have had it. Yeah. It was a very different world. I think that the concerns that they had were different. I think they probably were more concerned about our generation's motivations, morals, ethics, and less concerned about what I don't think my parents ever were worried that like microwave ovens were destroying America, you know? I don't think they're worried. I mean, more seriously, I don't think they really worried that video games were like, or like the radio or rap music or whatever. I don't think they cared about that. I don't think they thought that. I do think they were worried about like we weren't going to church enough. But that's it. So yes, old people have always worried about young people. Some of the fears are different, right? And I think the fears that I have about technology are fairly different from what my parents had about me.
Maybe a last question just to bring us home is the question we've been reflecting on all day. You know, Nick Thompson as the creative, the technologist, the father, is creativity dead? What do you think? Where's it going?
No, I think creativity is alive and well, and I think it's more important than ever. I think that like going to see art, going to see music, going to like listen to beautiful things, I think it's absolutely out there. I think AI does create, as I said in the sort of the photograph story, it does create these incredible opportunities. And I think it's even more important for us. I just went the other night to a beautiful dance show up at the Park Avenue Armory, right? It is so good to get out there and see humans being creative and showing love and brilliance. It's really important to get out there, and it's really important to make that stuff. So absolutely not dead. And in fact, like I hope it is as vigorous as it can possibly get.